All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is 12:35 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, good afternoon. I'm Councilman John Bullock, Chair of the Education, Youth, and Older Adults Committee. We are joined by Councilmember Mark Parker of the 1st District, Vice Chair of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm also joined by Councilmember Ramos of the 14th District. And also joined by Councilmember Zach Blanchard of the 11th District. Thank you, Council Vice President. Today, the committee will, we're also joined, thank you for our staff to the committee, Julianne Jamad, thank you. And then also, we have representatives from Baltimore City Public Schools, our Board of School Commissioners, as well as representatives, I believe, from the Mayor's Office and also Council President's Office, as well as the most important folks, members of the public. So again, thank you all for being here today. So today, the committee will be hearing Resolution 250043R, Informational Hearing Process of Permanent School Closures. I did want to schedule this this meeting because it's an issue that affects everyone in Baltimore. I know as a council member, there have been several schools in my council district that have been closed over the years. Some of them have been traditional public schools. Some of them have been charter schools. I would also say I'm very ecumenical as it comes to education. And so I have relationships and have experience with both traditional public schools, public charter schools as well. So again, this is a great opportunity for us to talk and gather some more information. I do want to note, obviously, there are some issues that are pending as it relates to schools in the city, and we'll be hearing about that. This forum today is not the appeal process. However, it is an opportunity for us to gain more information around the process of what information and factors go into school closures, so we can all be on the same page, not only for our council districts, but also for members of the public and for our school leaders who we are so thankful for. With that, I do want to then go ahead and shift to our agency report, since I know we do have a presentation from Baltimore City Schools. So I would welcome you to go ahead and get started with that. So thank you. And as you present, please give us your name, and you know the drill. So again, we appreciate you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting us to this informational presentation. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Senior Executive Director for the Office of New Initiatives for City Schools. I want to acknowledge Vice Chair Parker, who is joining us in the room, and she put her hand up. Different Parker. From our Board of School Commissioners, I want to acknowledge the Chief of Staff, Allison Perkins Cohen, Melissa Broom, our Legislative Director. I want to also acknowledge Principal McLean, who's a principal of one of our schools that, and she will be participating in the testimony at a particular point today of Park Heights Academy is her school that merged with a school that closed. So she's going to share a little bit about that experience. I want to acknowledge my team, Lindsay Anderson, who's a manager in the Office of New Initiatives, and Kizzy Smith, who's a specialist. With that, I'm a little bit nervous, so just this is my first hearing. Yep. I did, yeah. Oh, and our board liaison, I just noticed is here, is also Youssef. I just want to acknowledge Ahmad. I just want to acknowledge him as well.
And I just want to know we're also being joined by Councilman Jermaine Jones of the 12th District. And also, you can feel free to stand or sit, whatever you prefer in terms of presentation. Feel free.
Okay, okay, that's great. All right, I thought it would be important to kind of just start with a little bit of an overview of the slide. I'm not going to, this deck has things that I'm going to present, and as well as things that are in appendices as reference points. Because this is about two different kinds of school types, I think the first thing I just want to start off with is there are different rules and regulations that garner the review and processes for traditional schools, charter schools, both for public schools, and so there are some differences in the processes. So we're going to start off by talking about the process as it relates to traditional schools. And that process, it has rules and regulations within COMAR, as well as our board policy FCA that governs, and its administrative regulation FCA-RA that governs the rules and regulations around the closure of traditional public schools. And so by that policy, one of the first kind of steps in the process when we're bringing forward a recommendation to our board around school closure is to actually have meetings with elected officials in our board to share the recommendations that are coming up for the upcoming year. So we do that. It's usually mid to late October. There are date requirements. It was October 28th for our schools that went through the process this year. The recommendations are announced in November every year, usually in the second week of November is when we share them publicly. With that announcement, they get posted on our district website. There's an announcement that goes into 2 newspapers. There are letters that go home to families. There are phone calls that go home to families alerting them that there's a recommendation. Our social media gets updated. So there's a variety of means of communication that there are recommendations pending and the details of the recommendations. And all of the letters and the reports are linked on our district website that goes over, there's a page that's dedicated to this process that members of the public can view. It's still there, it's viewable today. And so it kicks off this series of meetings and begins with sharing those recommendations and the rationale in a public meeting with our Board of School Commissioners. From there, it kicks off a variety of meetings at school. So it starts with school-based meetings. The letters that go out share the dates of those meetings. There's meetings with staff. They share that there's this recommendation. This is what it means. This is how we will support you if the recommendation is approved. It's currently a recommendation. Here are all the ways to make sure that our board has feedback from you about these recommendations. And so those are the purpose of those meetings. We do a similar meeting with families at the school. Traditional schools, per that process, then will have to hold a steering committee made up of members of the school community. So that can be staff at the school, parents, community members, and students, particularly middle and high school students are invited to participate in those steering committee meetings. When we share the recommendations at the school-based meetings, members of that meeting, anybody in the meeting are told that they may participate in the steering committee and can elect to be part of that process. This is the full timeline. It includes both the whole process. There's an alignment between the charter and traditional school process in terms of the board puts those dates. There's alignment with those dates, so you're seeing the full process here. But we'll later in the presentation talk about the renewal process. There are hearings, so for schools are recommended for closure, our board holds 2 hearings that are dedicated to public comment. And so we take as many people within each of these 2-hour meetings as possible. Members of the public can testify orally, submitting a video to be played when their name is called, or submitting written testimony to be read by the board exec when their name is called. And so that's conducted as part of this process, and then the board votes in a public meeting. And then roughly 30 days from that, an official final report is shared with school communities, with letters, and with any directions around appeal rights where applicable. School closure is very complex, so there's a number of factors that we're looking at. The full required factors by COMAR and our policy FCA-FCA-RA are in the appendix of this presentation. I'm just going to speak generally about the main key things that we look at in regards to proposed recommendations for closures of traditional schools. The key things we're trying to understand is both that overall academic performance of schools, as well as their ability to provide academic programming to students. We look at climate indicators such as suspensions, attendance, chronic absence data, as well as the school's ability to provide supports to attend to those issues within their schools. We look at access, quality, and distribution of programming. We want to make sure as we're making changes to the district, all geographies are equitably served within our district in terms of access to programming and quality education, as well as all populations of students. So we want to understand the demographics of schools, any kind of special programs or unique programs that are within schools that are serving special populations. We're looking at school enrollment and school size. That's important. In a little bit, I'm going to get into why that's important, but it plays a major role in a school's ability to afford programming for students. We're looking at building utilization and condition. City schools has had, the oldest infrastructure in the state for a number of years. And so we look at that. Utilization plays a role in how we get approval for capital funding. And so schools that are underutilized are harder for us to take care of when capital needs come up. We've been implementing our 21st Century Buildings Plan and Built to Learn, so recommendations related to that are considered as part of this process, and then operator renewal. We've had to, with the combination of 21st Century, which was a major plan, we had a goal, we had a very bold goal that many people in the community helped us to be able to get the funding and the permission to be able to use funding differently to implement, but we had a bold goal of, which should not be a bold goal, should be just the standard expectation, looking at our infrastructure of schools, that every student in our city should have high quality education. That 21st Century Plan came with some costs. It came with some requirements of closing and surplusing school communities. And so we've been in a process of recommending schools for closure and combining, largely driven by that and other factors that I'm going to get into. But we center the work for us is important in that it impacts our students. We never lose sight of what it means for students. And so our strategy is built on the premise that every child deserves that high quality education, that we should be continually improving how we do this work, both in how we support communities through the recommendation phase and how we develop recommendations, and then also how we support communities when the board does make a decision to make a major change to a school community. We also believe that communities that have experienced the most disinvestment and have the least access to our resources are communities that we should prioritize for funding. And that we should only propose changes if we have some right conditions. We have a people-centered approach, so we haven't taken the approach that you see in many cities where they're like, we're gonna close 50 schools in a year. We have not done that because these are major changes to school communities that have long-lasting impacts. And so attending to the people is really important to us, and ensuring that for that change, that for many folks go through a grieving process, what results is actually better for the children and the families that are served. And so we're looking at, do we have strong leadership in place? What is the conditions of the facility? Do we have ability to improve the facility? Has the facility been recently improved? Do we have partnerships that we can leverage to push resources into school communities going through that change? And then understanding it's also important to us that we understand the role that school plays within the community, both currently and historically, and how we handle documenting those changes and creating space for communities and dealing with those changes. The annual review process is a big process, so there's lots of recommendations. So I think it's just important for folks to understand that school closure is not the only kind of recommendation that comes out of this. The original 21st Century Buildings Plan, that list, is one of the things that got approved through this annual review process, as well as the approval of our high school plan, Built to Learn. So about what schools we would prioritize, what schools would go first, and as we made changes each year to those major plans, if there's a school relocation, a grade reconfiguration, if we want to create a brand new traditional school, it would come through this process. If we're surplusing buildings or lands, combining school closure, and then operator renewal. So it is a major thing where we're looking at all of these different levers in terms of what it means for schools. So why are we doing this? Like, what is it that we're trying to address? Well, there are a number of challenges that we are trying to solve as a district. We, as I said kind of earlier, we've faced significant shortfalls in our funding when you compare us to other districts while still having the oldest infrastructure. So we're very thankful, very happy that we have the 21st Century Built to Learn plan, but we have many more children in other buildings that deserve those same level of resources. And when you look at how we compare to neighboring districts, you can see the significant gaps in funding, which is why our infrastructure looks the way that it does. And it says something to our students. It's meaningful to our students when we're able to make changes. And so it just, you can see this comparison of the amount of resources that comes from the comptroller's study and the 10-year averages of funding. You see the stark differences between what city schools has versus what Montgomery County or PG County or Baltimore County has. And we look at that, our $231 per pupil in facilities funding compared to thousands of dollars in the other counties. And the other kind of implication of those short funds is it creates a maintenance challenge for us every year in how we maintain our facilities. And so there is about a $375 million gap in what we're allocated versus what we actually really need to take care of and have healthy facilities for our school community. We require around $530 million to be able to maintain the level of buildings that our students should have, but we only receive $155 million in facilities funding to manage our portfolio. And so, it started off with 21st Century. So when we're talking about school closure, a lot of that was driven by that plan. We were required to surplus 26 buildings when we, got the funding and went through the contracting to be able to begin the 21st Century Building Plan. We had a utilization rate, meaning how many students we have in a building as compared to the amount of students a building can serve in terms of seats, of about 67%. And so we were required to reach 87% by 2018-19. And then we were required to surplus to the city of Baltimore 26 buildings as part of that plan. And so that required a number of closures and combining of schools. And since the resources that we had hoped we would get enough to do every school that would continue to house children, we only got enough, and with refinancing, we're able to do 29 buildings impacting 34 school communities. We prioritized, we knew we had to prioritize. So we prioritized communities that had the least investments in terms of access to, and by investments, we use a thing called the Community Conditions Index, which can be found more description on our website and our Comprehensive Educational Facilities Master Plan. But essentially, we try to understand what is the environment in which our schools are situated and the neighborhoods in which our students attend, and understanding their access to resources. So meaning access to transportation, to stable housing, to grocery stores, right? And so communities that have less access to those kind of resources were the very communities where we invested first in our 21st Century Plan. And so those were the school communities, but it came with a cost of having to combine and close schools. And we knew we were gonna have to also invest in school communities where we had severe overcrowding, where did not have enough seats to meet the need. And so this map shows the combination of those with where those investments are. So the purple are where we've made investments through 21st Century, and under Chief Washington and Cindy Smith have been able to be strategic around additional monies to make other major investments, using the same kind of priority setting that I'm talking about here, to make those dollars go further. And so that's what this map shows. The other challenges is we've been dealing with declining enrollment. Many urban districts across the United States have been dealing with declining enrollment, and Baltimore is not different. And our schools have been around, many of them for very, very long periods of time. And so where we need more seats, we often don't have the space to serve students. Where we have tons of seats, we often don't have the students to fill those seats. And so it creates this challenge of how do we address those needs given these kind of unique challenges that we're dealing with in terms of our portfolio of schools. And then there's so that's about seats. That's about like buildings and how our buildings look and building space. The other challenge with that kind of dropping enrollment and how students show up within schools is we have schools that are undersized. Schools meaning undersized, I mean schools that are under 300. This is also a thing nationally that districts are looking at when schools fall under 300. It is very challenging to be able to provide all of the programming that students should have and all the experience they should have within their schooling. And so when you're in an elementary school that's undersized, that means that your child may have art and it may have gym, but is not at the level and frequency of their peers in more right-sized schools. If you're in middle grades, you're not having middle grade specific experiences. You're often set up like a elementary school, but just big kids. And so you're not having the same amount of elective experiences that help you really kind of start to learn who you are as a student, science experiences, specialized experiences, you're not having that. And as a high school, similarly, and education is more expensive as you go up. So it's more expensive to provide programming to high schools than it is to middle, than it is to elementary, because you need more specialization. You need more classes. Students need a lot more things to be prepared as you move up the educational landscape. So high schools that are undersized often don't have the college and career readiness opportunities of schools that are sized appropriately. These schools also struggle with having other staffing. So often they don't have an AP, they can't afford that. They don't have academic coaches working with their teachers. And they often have one teacher per grade level. That's important. The work of educators, and I was an educator for a very long time before moving into my role in central office, and I was also a teacher coach, is collaborative. And so having the ability to work with someone who's teaching the same content and same grade level of you is really important to help have the strongest lessons and be able to attend to the different and unique needs of students that changes. So when you're the only one, sure, you can kind of plan with the third grade teacher or the fifth grade teacher, but you're not teaching the same things. And so that has a direct impact on the experience of students. And then, these schools are strapped, so they're not having the social emotional supports. We talked about chronic absence is a big challenge we've been trying to address in our city. That requires a lot of additional people. There's schools that are able to afford contracts with people who will go and knock on doors to find out why students are not there. And just, figure out how to provide and connect families to other wraparound supports. And then schools that are undersized also have limited kind of other activities such as like athletics and clubs, after school programming. It's very challenging when you don't have enough resources to do that. One of the questions I saw in the request for this meeting was about how does the community participate when we're in the legal process? So prior to the vote, I talked a little bit about that, but there's, again, school-based meetings where the community can share feedback. There's note taking in the meeting. All of those are shared with our board of school commissioners. They can participate in steering committee meetings. Everybody is invited to attend who wants to attend. There are required set of people that we need to make sure are invited, but additional people can say, I want to be part of that process. Community can send written feedback to the board from the first day the recommendation is shared until the Friday before the board votes on that recommendation. So at any point in time, they can send as much written feedback to our board as they want, and then they can participate in the hearings. After the vote, again, we found for traditional schools, parents and students can appeal that process to the state board. We will begin a transition process of support, so they are able to participate in the transition committee, attend events, participate in focus groups, participate in the school budget process, which is really important when we're combining school communities or making sure parents and students of both communities participate in that process to set the priorities for the next year. And then we also do a lot of surveying to make sure that when we're combining school communities, that we're setting up the school to meet the needs of students, and then we use focus groups and families through that process. One of the things, since I've been doing this work with my team, with Lindsay Anderson on the traditional school support that we've done, is we've extended the level of support. So there used to be a time where we did a legal process and we said, okay, good luck, and we handed it off to the principal. Now we hold on to support of school communities for 2 to 3 years. And so we look at ways to make sure that we're supporting the existing programming. I talked about the transition committee. That transition committee sets up what the work will look like. They're very much informed and part of that. We work with other agencies, and then we have events so that students can start to get to know students of schools that we've identified as receivers ahead of, so they can start to make friends or start to have familiar faces. We do events to bring families together, again, for that familiarity, to meet that school team in advance, and to be able to see like the school building and see, like, be able to get a real sense of what that school community looks like. And then we do events to help when schools close, people go through a mourning process. Or schools, there are relationships that are there are firsts that people have. And so we work with outside partners who are experts in that, and holding space for people to be able to actually talk about their feelings, and for us to be able to document the history of schools. And then we, again, for schools where we're combining, we look at how we align resources and continue to push resources to those schools to fulfill the promise of improved programming. And I sort of talked about these things, a lot of these things that are on this slide. The other thing I didn't talk about that's also part of the support process is we work with the school leaders to identify students who may need additional supports and families that need additional supports, so that planning is happening ahead of the beginning of the school year, so that students and families are coming into a school community that knows a bit about them, is waiting for them, and is ready to support them. And so that's one of the other kind of big things that we make sure that we do. And then we're always looking for ways to kind of improve the process. We also, in terms of agencies, we work closely with the Department of Transportation. If this change involves neighborhood schools where many families walk to school. So we want to make sure, as we have families walking new paths, that those are safe walking paths. So we have a regular kind of ongoing meeting with the Department of Transportation where we flag recommendations that are pending, and then begin, if they're approved, working with them on like how we address certain kind of challenges that could exist in walk paths. And they've been very supportive in that process. And so this is just an example of some of the events from what that 2 to 3 years of support looks like. The first one is us actually doing a walk with DOT. We often do many walks and with families, because if you have little people that you're walking with, that's a different walking pace than adults walking it. And so we want to understand that. And children tend to have, especially if they're going to school by themselves, just like adults, may have paths they're walking that you didn't expect them to walk. So we want to know all those things. And so that's what that first picture is showing, one of the family events that we had Samuel Coolidge Taylor when Utah Marshburn closed, and a transition, that's a picture of a transition committee between MLK and what was once called Edgecombe Circle, which is now Park Heights Academy. I'm going to invite Principal McLean to come up and kind of tell you a little bit about what her school was like before the combining and what it was like after.
Hi, everyone. I'm Monica McLean, principal of Park Heights Academy. So when I first got to Edgecombe Circle, it says 215, but we really had 190 students in 2019 when I joined the team. And we only had one class per grade. We had 2 teachers that were split teaching grades, so they were doing 4th and 5th grade ELA. And we just didn't have a lot of resources to do anything. We didn't have a lot of community partners. We were just a lonely school at the top of the hill. But now, since we have merged, our school is a lot more robust now. We are slated to have over 400 students next year. Our students, instead of just having music, halftime music and halftime art, they have Drama Berry, they have the STEAM Factory, which is a STEAM-based resource. They have art, music. We have 7 after-school programs, just a lot of different things that we have done to make it a welcoming place for students. Additionally, we have had facilities enhancement. We have gotten a new HVAC, and we have other things that are slated to happen, but we have a playground and just space to include different partners in our building. Oh, it's me, I'm sorry. And so one of the big things that came out of our transition meetings were the families in the Edgecombe Circle MLK community really took exception to the number of schools that had Black names that were being closed in the community. And so one of the things that we committed to is we would honor those spaces in our building. So if you look at the screen, we have the MLK Cafe. We also have the the Malcolm X Gymatorium. We have a mural already ready to go inside of the gymatorium and a mural outside of the rec center in our building. And so when we did the merger, we were very intentional about including folks from the closing school. So we hired that staff. We allowed for those students to participate in the design of the playground, but also the community mural. And we had a lot of activities to make families and the staff comfortable with joining our school. So all in all, now we have, right now in grades pre-K through 3, we have 3 classes per grade. Next year pre-K through 4, we have 3 classes per grade. Next year we'll have 3 classes in 5th grade. But now our kids have a real school. They have access to a lot more than they did when we first got there. And we have people that want to come and work in our building, but also come and support our building. We did not have a lot of partners initially. Now we have a lot of the Park Heights community, inclusive of Councilman Middleton, that support our school. So we are really blessed to have participated in this process, and the impact has benefited us.
We also had a researcher kind of look at our process, and they interviewed students, parents, teachers that were impacted. So we had Hopkins do a qualitative research study on our process, and what they found is that school community members held on to important memories as important first, and so being responsive, that is important in terms of knowing again what the schools mean. That preserving, incorporating visible and symbolic cultural elements into the combined school was important. And so that's something that's been a part of our process. So really, for every school that combines, we go through a naming process around how do we maintain that legacy and that history. And we often, one of the newer things we've been doing in the last few years is creating memory books with the school community so that everyone participates, parents, students, teachers, and creating that memory book. That has been really important to school communities. We intentionally try to, with the HC support, bring over staff from the school that's closing into the school that's merging. So there are familiar faces, but there is a mutual consent. So there has to be a desire to be part of that school community, but that is something we try to make space for and try to encourage as part of this process. The school leader plays a big role, and so that's something that we're intentionally thinking about before and we're proposing these things and the implications. And so, part of the success of what's happened at Parks Heights Academy, a big part of that is having a leader like Principal McLean who has clear vision and is able to bring and understood the importance of making sure all those stakeholders in the community were part of what continues to contribute to the success of the school. What they found, and we also did our own, we always are doing focus groups trying to figure out what's happening with families and students and staff after. What they found is that most community members report that they feel, it takes a while, but they begin to feel like a family in their new school community, and that they actually did receive the more opportunities, the more collaboration, the more electives, that educators, things opened up for them they didn't know were possible as part of these changes, and that increase of resources. So the things that we were hoping to see is being shown and to be happening in the research and the report. And we annually when we do the recommendations report, which is on the district website, is shared with the elected officials on the board, we in that intentionally include updates on any schools that were closed the year before, so that we're reporting on that annually. All right, I'm gonna take us through the renewal process and wrap up. And so for charter schools process is a little bit different. The board policy that governs the review process of charter schools is IHBJ, and its administrative regulation is IHBJ-RA. That is our policy that governs our work with any kind of operator-led school, which a charter school is, meaning there's an outside entity that is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the school. Schools experience it every 3, 5, or 8 years, depending on their contract term. It actually begins in the penultimate year of their contract. We intentionally have a process that is both and has been both qualitative and quantitative, which is different than other places in the United States are starting to do what we've been doing since 12, 13, in terms of having both a serious qualitative and quantitative review. We're looking at 3 key areas when we're assessing the efficacy of charter schools: student achievement and success, school climate, and then financial management of governance. And then it can result in those same terms or non-renewal and then sometimes closure. It's a multi-tiered process. So we have an internal, external stakeholder group, meaning there's staff from various offices within city schools, as well as outside partners sit on a advisory board. It's called the Charter and Operator-Led Schools Advisory Board, who participate in the initial review of applications. So for charter schools, when their school is entering the last year of their contract, they submit an application for renewal. And so that's their opportunity to provide their evidence, their feedback. There's like a list of questions and places where we gather evidence that is reviewed, certain elements of that is reviewed by our charter and operator-led advisory board to develop recommendations. The whole thing is reviewed to develop recommendations. Certain elements are reviewed by them to give ratings for some of the areas. And those recommendations, they're advisory. The board is designed to be advisory to the CEO. So they share their recommendations with the CEO. She does her review, and then she's charged with doing the official recommendation to the board of school commissioners. And the Board of School Commissioners has the ultimate decision in determining what to do in terms of the outcome. And so they're considering the recommendations and the rationale. There is a report for all these processes. There is a report that is released that goes through all the findings and the key rationale that describes the key findings that lead to the recommendations. This is the timeline. I went over that. A key difference in the process for charter schools is there is a work session opportunity for operators. This is there. It happens in the middle of the process after we do the recommendations before the vote, typically in the month of December. It's their opportunity to present to the board. So they've seen the report, they know what the recommendation is, they know what the strengths and weaknesses that we've noted are, and so it's their ability to kind of make their case. And they can, just like in the other process, send additional materials, written materials to the board from the date of the recommendation through that Friday before the board votes. That the board will consider. In terms of what goes into the recommendations, these are all the things that we consider in the academic measures. I'm not gonna name all of them, but essentially we're looking at performance on state assessments, Growth is an area where it has more weight, so there's weights within the rubric, it has more weight because we're in a place of improvement and we're expecting to see a level of improvement. And so that's one of the kind of key areas that we look at. We look at the overall application results in its own rating, and we're looking at practices to address areas of weakness within that. Schools that have diversity, we look at if there's any gaps in performance between racial and ethnic groups. It's a qualitative measure, so we're trying to also understand, like, what are schools doing about that? What are the practices that they have in place? Do they have best practices aligned with research to support that? For secondary schools, we're looking at college and career readiness, so that means we're looking at participation in things that the state deems college ready, such as AP, dual enrollment, CTE, IB, SAT exams. So the participation of that, success on those measures, and then 16 months after graduation, what % of students are enrolled in college, and then it's compared, most of these measures are compared to other schools that are similar. And then we look at a survey that's called the 5 Essentials. It's a research-based tool that is predictive of future success. Because we've been in the state, we're in a new test is about to change again. We wanted to include that measure because of that research backing. And so schools that do well on the 5 Essentials are 10 times likely to improve than schools that are weak. Schools that are weak in at least one, and one of the area, any one of the 5 areas that we look at in the 5 Essentials have less than a 10% chance of improving. And so it's a very predictive measure. So that's one of the things. And climate, one of the things that are part of the operative review process is they go through a site visit. And we use a partner who's an expert in this, Schoolworks, who conducts these visits. And that's looking at practices in the school. That's an opportunity too, where there are focus groups that parents participate in, students, teachers, the operating organization, and it results in ratings. We're looking at survey data from family, cohort retention, which is our students staying with that school over time. Chronic absences and suspensions, we look at that in a qualitative way, so what the data is saying, and then what are the supports in place, and what does that look like, and then their programming for students with disabilities. In the financial section, we're looking at their audits, and what the audits reveal, as well as any additional financial information that's needed that comes out of that review. Operator capacity, we're looking at their ability to meet critical federal, state, and district requirements. And then school leadership is part of that site visit that is considered in this part of the review. The ways that families participate and community participates, so students and staff participate in that 5 Essentials survey. That's that research-backed tool. I named the focus groups, and then it's all of the kind of public testimony that you see here. And after the vote, again, operators are able to appeal to the state board. There are transition meetings that we have with families to support them in preparing for the next year, as well as staff. We plan events, we have focus groups, we have surveys. Okay, I know it was a lot. That is it.
It was a lot, and thank you for it. We wanted as much detail as possible. Again, we know this is a very intricate process. It takes some time. So again, we appreciate you going over it, and also appreciate the feedback and also the experience that shared in terms of Park Heights Academy. So much appreciated. I do want to note that while the presentation was going on, we were joined by Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton of the 6th District and Councilman James Torrance of the 7th District, both members of the committee. I'm glad to have you here. All right, before we go on to testimony, because I know there are some folks here that want to testify as well, are there any burning questions from members of the committee? So please, Council Vice President Middleton, then we'll go down the line, yes.
Well, first of all, I just have to say thank you to the Principal McLean of Park Heights Academy, because at the end of the day, that's what all of this takes, is a very strong leader of the school system. And Principal McLean really took on a very hard task, and to just see everything that has happened in that school and the surrounding community and the partnerships, because that's a big key in this, and all of us on this committee know one of the organizations, Catherine's Family, Children, and Youth Services, pretty much has, they're using part of the grounds for just phenomenal food and shelter and just helping all different ages in that community. And I know they have sites everywhere else. So thank you for supporting organizations like that. Park Heights Renaissance. So all of that outside outreach is what it takes to really help a school thrive. And this particular school also is connected to the James D. Gross Rec Center, which is still, I think, going through the long renovation period of that old building, just getting the right people to do the updates and construction. But I also want to add that all of this process, I want to say that Langston Hughes was like, if not the first, one of the first schools to start this transition of closure. And it just took me back that that building is now it's when George Mitchell was alive, and he was the advocate for that building, which is now a community and business resource center. But through that transition with those elementary school students going to Pimlico, really had to take some skill with the school system, because to make it, you mentioned a walkable neighborhood, and I'm happy to say that now, and I was sharing with the councilman here, that they renovated houses to accommodate and help continue to make that area safe with the walking. So, there is progress with some of these school closures and transition. I have MLK that now belongs to the city at this point, and we have someone that bought that's Kennedy Krieger, and we're doing things with that. So it is a shock at the beginning, but in the long run, when you understand development, at least in that area that I represent, you know that it had to happen to help the development continue to thrive and take place. So just thank you and the school system for, I just lived through the process, and I know there's some kinks in it, but it can work through consistent communication.
I definitely appreciate that perspective. Councilman Jones, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to thank you, Angela, for your presentation and just your partnership in the community and always listening to the concerns, and everyone else on your team and everyone else in this room, just for being a partner when it comes to listening to the community and hearing what their concerns are, especially through this last round of school closures. But with that said, I guess one thing that I've learned, and one thing I just want to highlight and ask kind of a question on, is in regards to the timeline. While looking at the entire presentation, which was extensive, I kind of see some of the benefits that can come from a school closure. But I think one of the things which makes it hard or difficult for the community to see the benefits of it is that quick timeline. Like, you're talking about getting notifications on November 12th, and then actually a decision being made in like January, which is almost like 2 months and 60 days, which kind of leaves a shock to a neighborhood and community. And when people go in shock, they go in protection mode. They go in, let me protect before a decision is being made so I can have time to digest. Have there been talks or concerns on making this step one process that's kind of in consideration, and next year we're really looking to give people an opportunity to kind of absorb the process, rather than from November you hear about it, in January a decision has to be made, because parents are really invested in these schools and their children are invested there. So that's all.
Yeah, we actually extended the timeline. The timeline used to be 30 days.
Okay.
November announced, December decided, and that was that. So it didn't have any of that support. It didn't have all the things that I talked about. So we did a lot to sort of expand the timeline. We've tried announcing early. The challenge with that is when school communities hear that, and they can sometimes start leaving a school, and if we're trying to deal with falling enrollment, it kind of worsens the situation for the students that are staying. And so we've tried different things to try to create like more time, talking to people different earliest. This timeline allows us to have, schools are very changing places. It allows us to have data that is real time, accurate data about what's really happening with the school. And allows us to have notice for families so that there's space for them. We do a lot to be aligned with like our choice and our enrollment processes so they know early enough and there's time to sort of build community before they are enrolled in another school. And so, yeah, there's just, there's no perfection in the timeline, but trying to go out early actually creates a worse situation for the very families that you're trying to help when it comes to neighborhood schools that have to kind of exist and support school communities.
Can I just add a little bit, Councilman Jones, too? So first of all, I just want to praise Angela, and you're right to praise her for the work that she does. She is really a national thought leader in how to do this work. This is not work anybody wants to do. This is work that we've inherited from generations of disinvestment in certain communities in Baltimore that has resulted in population decline and created a situation that we're all inheriting now, where we have schools that are serving students that are just not enough students to support the kind of programming students deserve. And so the way the thoughtful way Angela handles this process by being really thinking about school names and preserving school names, by involving both communities to help work through the selection of a leader when there's a leader selection decision that needs to be made, to really think about what the programming of the new school would be. This has really taken what in many communities you'll see across the country who do this work. It's a much more adversarial process because and then we also do a lot of work on the back end too to align our partners to invest in the receiving school. So first, that's why the 21st Century buildings were designed to absorb, most of those buildings absorb students from closing schools intentionally because we wanted to reinvest in neighborhoods that had been disinvested in. And when we ran out of those funds, now we use partners we pull partners together like the Ravens, Under Armour, Heart of America, Kaboom, to try to really have impact on those schools. So just commending Angela in the way that we do the work, I think is really an exemplar nationally in terms of cities that have to make these difficult decisions. However, I will say your point is a good one of the timeline. We have bookends on this too, is the other thing, is so like you need certain analysis and certain information to inform. There's the amount of team analysis and data that goes into these decisions is complicated in terms of, apartment developments or closures or things going on in communities on the front end. So you need that information on the front end. On the back end, we need to make these decisions in times for students to go through a choice process if they're at a choice grade or to get into another school. And so it's really condensed in order to make sure that the families who are impacted have opportunity to actually then make another decision. And as Angela said, I think the most challenging thing is when a decision is drawn out long, it has really negative implications on communities.
Yeah, got you. No, I appreciate the clarification. I guess one of my questions was regarding whether or not a school is even, I don't want to say on the chopping block, but even if it's an opportunity for that to happen, where they were like, okay, if we don't improve, then we could be looked at, because often schools like, I had no idea we weren't performing well because we love this school, that we were even being considered. But I understand your concern when to say to even create a classification of schools that may be considered, then you create people wanting to exit out and leave out. And yeah, it's a tough process, but thank you for the clarification.
Yes, and thank you for the thoughtful question and the answers. It's helpful. Councilman Blanchard, and then we'll shift over to the other side.
Mrs. Perkins-Cohen, I thought it was pretty funny when Mrs. Alvarez said she was nervous because the council may ask maybe a couple tougher questions today, but I'm sure it's nothing like what she has to work through when she's dealing with school communities, as I've seen firsthand. So it's really important work that you do. I'm just completely stuck. It's just a comment on the capital investment differences between ourselves and other large districts in the state. I did some back of the napkin math to add the state CIP numbers to the local funds numbers, but it's still like, we're like 2.5 times less than Baltimore County, and that's the closest comparable county. I just think that I appreciate your point. Like money always has a very important role to play in this, and it's in every sort of big process. And so it's really important to just recognize the scale of the challenge and just not having the funding that the other large counties in Maryland have at their disposal to do this. So I appreciate it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Blanchard. And one of the things that I know, as mentioned in the presentation, was really around the disparities that we have in the city, but also the old infrastructure that we have. And so again, when you start thinking about, heating and cooling and just, regular maintenance, right, it can be very challenging. The roof definitely is one of the issues we deal with at a lot of our schools. So again, it is significant. Councilman Torrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sick. That's why I have a mask on. Angela, I appreciate your work. The only thing I have to say is that I think that there needs to be more support in the front end, especially with our Black operators. What I saw at Newsong and then with other Black operators is that they didn't have that intentional support they needed to operate a school. And I think we've gotten the piece of like, how do we merge communities, right? But how do we ensure that a community can stay? Because there's a disparity between Patterson Park Public Charter and others who've had the investment, that have the donors, and how do we support them before they get to that point where they can't financially operate or don't have the expertise in their building?
Yeah, and I'm going to be careful because we're in an appeal window. There's an appellant in the room. And so I don't want to get into those things kind of specifically. Charter schools are a different animal. So when an organization is proposing to the board and to the community that they're going to open a school, they're saying, we want to take on the responsibility of operations and that we have the ability to do that. And for us, like, charter schools are really important. Like, charters in Maryland are in Baltimore, right? And they're an important part of our reform efforts. By law, by state law, and by charter policy, a big part of their role is to improve outcomes for students. We've, had some unfortunate, with Newsong, because it's not a subject of appeal. We've, once in a lifetime changes with an organization that dissolved. But there's a responsibility with the operating organization to be able to really they're signing up to say that we can manage the finances, that we can manage school operations. That's what they're committing to. That's what they're signing a contract saying they're able to do. I am sensitive to that the need to have Black operators. I think that's important, especially in a district that's a majority Black district. But I think there may be a bigger ask that's beyond city schools around that in terms of other organizations that can support nonprofits, because now we're getting into nonprofit management and how they're structured and how they manage. And I encourage people, where their renewal reports are public, they're on our website. So I do encourage folks to read them. There are a lot of factors that go into recommendations for charter schools, and a not effective in any category is what leads to a non-renewal recommendation and ultimately often a decision to close schools.
No, I hear you, but I think not even just the operational side of it, just basic mechanics of running a school. I've seen, and even from my time at city schools, we've had people recommended for non-renewal because we've had ninth graders not take algebra, right? scheduling? Who's paying attention? Who's doing the minutia? Who's helping them do that minutia? Are we sending a principal over, like Principal McLean, who's done scheduling, to help them think it through with their school leader? Because often they have different structures, and I'm just being transparent and I'm just being public. My presence is I have always never been a fan of charter schools in our district. I'm just being transparent. So people understand, like, this is me being even-handed. Been saying that while we may have them, we need to figure out how to support the Black and brown ones, because what I see is a disparity in terms of who we're closing, and I see white-led ones who don't even meet the muster in terms of the outcomes and still have lower outcomes than our regular traditional schools. And I know we're spending more money at charter schools, and they want more money in terms of their formula, right? So I'm seeing an apples to apples. We need to really figure this out, whether they become their own district and go get their own funding from the state, or we figure it out ourselves in terms of how do we support them, because it's going to be this way. It's going to be that rub until we see that population growth. And for me, it's hard because I have an institution that's closing. I have a mentor who put his heart and soul into an institution, Carl Stokes, and that disappeared. And one of the things I said this before to our state officials, we have models that, and I hate this part of state law, that the model belongs to the operator. I want us to have the model. If the operator ceases to exist, we should be able to take their model to maintain it so that families can have a choice. Do I want to maintain this model moving forward and it not be their copyright and we be able to use it, even if we offer them a one-time fee for just that actual model? Because that's what families buy into. It's the model that they're buying into. And if we as a district can improve on that model educationally, I think that's more of a service to our children.
Thank you for raising those points. I will say, and this is reflected in some of the conversation previously around efforts to reform. And so again, if there are things that work well, encapsulating those, I think is an important piece. I think the other thing that comes out of all this is also running schools is a difficult proposition. Right? It's not for the faint of heart. It's not easy. There are a lot of technicalities involved. There's the maintenance of the building. There's the programming, there's the academics. And the reality is we know that not all operators are created equal. And so we look at some of the economic disparities in our city, but also in terms of what it means to actually run a city, so run a city school, or whether it be traditional public school, charter school. Again, all that is important. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
And I just want to mention to my colleagues, we have an actual fund on the books that we have not funded that was passed by previous councils that provide the capital support. We've never funded it in the last 5 councils. So I think that's a conversation we should have with city schools. If we need to find a way to help them with providing a fund for the supports, it's still in the books that was created by Sheila Dixon. It's still in our books that we actually can fund to help the district, that help with capital for our charter schools.
And thank you again for raising the capital point, because again, that's significant and that's key. Thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's complexity here, and I'm trying to be very careful again, because like I said, we're in an appeal window. So, but the fundamental proposition of a charter school is that, and there is a review process and there's consistent reviews, is that they have the skills and knowledge to actually take on the operations and run schools, and there's checks throughout, which results in like readings and can result in accountability around that. And part of like the idea of charter schools is that they're bringing something unique, that they have a unique expertise, that they're bringing an innovative expertise that they're bringing forward. That's like in the law itself of what it means to be a charter school. So they're bringing things that a traditional school doesn't normally have, like a Montessori education, a language immersion program, and the law requires that there are a certain level of separation, like we're dealing with going through a regulation now that requires a certain level of separation and autonomy with charter schools and the public school system to be able to run and manage their program. And so there's real boundaries there that I think is important that people are aware of and the public is aware of. And so that is a big part of this conversation too.
Much appreciated. One last question from Vice Chair Parker before we go to public testimony. Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues. Thank you, everybody from City Schools, for being here. just some practical stuff, and then maybe a question. The 86% utilization rate that was part of the 21st Century Schools Initiative, that was required by 2018, I think you said. What's our utilization rate as of now? I mean, I know that was a long time ago, but where do we sit at the moment?
We've been holding at 87%.
Great. The buildings that have been closed but have not been transferred to the mayor and city council for surplusing things, the buildings are still owned by city schools, for example, Canton Middle, but others like that. Those count against the utilization rate?
That's a technical question that I'm not sure I know the answer to. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I do. They're counted in our utilization rate as long as we have them. They're just one clarification. They are not owned by city schools. City schools has the ability to control them as long as they have an educational purpose. Once the board decides there's no longer educational purpose, then they return to the city who owns them.
It's an important distinction. Thank you, Allison. Okay, and just again on utilization rates, for conversion charters where the building is owned by the mayor and city council and managed under the control of city schools while there's still an educational function, those also count towards the utilization rate even though they're a charter school?
Yes. If you're in a public building controlled by city schools, it counts in the utilization.
Right, but our other charters that are in buildings that are owned by someone else, controlled by someone else, they don't count towards utilization rate?
In private buildings.
Yeah, if they're in a private building, they don't count on the utilization rate.
Great.
And we don't look at, just to be very clear in terms of process, in terms of operator renewal, we don't look at utilization operator renewal. That's what we look at in the traditional school process.
Yeah, no, that's a really important distinction there. I think what I'd like you to go into a little bit more, and I appreciate there's two parallel but very different tracks and things you're looking at when it comes to non-renewal versus a closure and a merger of a traditional school. I really appreciated, as my other colleagues said, including Councilperson Torrance, the intentionality around closing and merging and what that's looked like. And thankfully, we went through a more intense period of that in that aftermath of the passage of 21st Century and haven't had to do it as much in the years since then. But I note that the process of non-renewal and then working to support that school community, especially those families in the aftermath, looks really different because it's not a merger, right? In the case of a non-renewal, there's not a plan from city schools. Okay, these students are going to, as like en masse with their culture and their identity and their history, merge into a new space and pull, because those students are going to scatter either based on where they live, based on their zone school, or they're going to navigate in some other way out of zone or to a different charter school. And so granted that it's a more complicated situation, but could you describe in more detail the supports given to individual families navigating the closure of a charter school? Especially because even though charter schools are by their very nature, except for conversion charters, by their nature are a citywide zone, they often have distinct neighborhood and community properties. Many of them are community schools. The overwhelming bulk of the ones I know of draw from their surrounding areas because that's a priority for families. And so even though they aren't a traditional school with a zone, they still often function and have the characteristics of it. And so I'm curious what supports exist right now.
Yeah, so we do, like I said, we have transition meetings. And so part of those meetings include, we look at the live intent, like where are our students who would go to that school, where do they live, and what schools are near them. And then we identify potential receivers. And so we'll do things like have like a mini fair where we'll invite multiple schools that are proximate to where we see that like grouping or clustering of families. And so we'll do a process of helping those families get in relationship with those schools. So they'll start with a mini fair at the school that is closing, and we'll invite the other schools to that school. And then we make sure they're invited to events. Sometimes we'll have special events. And so we do similar supports. They look different because the needs are different and because there's more a likelihood of spreading. We're not combining a community, but we will support families through regular meetings throughout that transition.
No, thank you for that very important question and the answer, because again, at the center of all this is really our young people and their families, right, and making sure that they are being served to the highest capability. I do want to provide opportunity for public testimony, and I know there'll be some additional questions that myself and other members of the committee may have. I'm just going to go down the list. Please let us know if you had not signed up or you want to testify as well. Let's see. So first on the list, I see Edwin Avent, please. And as you come, please just make sure you press the button and give us your name and go right ahead. We don't have testimony, but again, you can testify, but not necessarily the presentation, but not visual. Yeah.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Edwin Avent. I am the CEO of the Five Smooth Stones Foundation, and we are the operator of the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys. And our school has been recommended for not recommended actually, it's been voted that we close at the end of the school year. I want to testify today more than anything is that I kind of want to share the experience of an operator going through this process. You know, you kind of get blindsided by some things when you get your operator renewal report, whether or not they're going to renew you or not, right? You see some things in these reports that A, doesn't match up with your reality, and B, you never heard before you got this report at the end of your cycle. So I'll kind of begin with the process. One of the things is we had, as a cap for our school, 480 students as our cap. And for several years before the pandemic, we were at 480. And even in 2022, 23, we were at 453, okay? On January 10th, I went into a meeting with several of the people in this room, and including Dr. Santelises, to talk to them about what we saw as the impending change in the funding formula. We were going to go from 2%, that was the traditional amount, to 25%, that they were going to withhold from the money that they pay to the schools. So though we're talking about the Black-led schools and how we may not be able to raise as much money in everybody, we still raise money, but you also have an expectation about the amount of revenue that you're going to receive. And so we were challenging them, saying, you know, this 25% is a lot of money. We don't think it's right. It's against the state regulation. So that was on January 10th of 2023. On January 18th, of 2023, I got an email telling me that you're going to be recommended for non-renewal. When you're sitting in my seat, it's hard not to take it as if that was retaliation for me saying that we need to get our money. It's hard not to take it that way. Then we were told we need to have a meeting with your families. You need to send this notice home to the families, and we need to have a meeting with them very soon. And so that meeting then took place on January 25th. Now, sitting in our seat, if you look at the IHBJ, which they pointed out, which is our regulations, according to the IHBJ, the only people who are supposed to be notified of the recommendation by the CEO is my board, the Board of Commissioners, the mayor, and the local elected official where the school is located. Those are only supposed to be the people notified. And I think one of the reasons that is the case, because when you say to a bunch of families that we're going to recommend you for non-renewal, they don't hear we're recommending you for non-renewal. They hear your school is going to close. So they begin to scramble to look for other places. Because if you talk to them on January 25th, the lottery is happening only days away in February, early February, where everybody has to submit their names for the lottery. So people begin looking for other places for their students. So if you could imagine, like, wow, you know, you're telling all my families before the vote happens. So we could get voted to be renewed, but you're telling them this before the vote happens. So now you're scaring the people, and then the people decide to go elsewhere. Well, few days later in February, we get renewed. As we begin the next year, our enrollment is down to 300. You could do the math. Do the math on, say, whether it was 50 kids times 12,500 or 100 kids times 12,500. It knocks your revenue down tremendously, right? And your enrollment from your cap, what you agreed to say, this is the number of students we're gonna have, but now they've been driven away, they're scared away. And so now you gotta start making it with that. But then they go ahead and do the 25%, and they do it for the next 3 years. 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26. So you're getting 23% less of the revenue that you used to get. And so for a school like ours, like you point out, they should have the resources. Yeah, we should, but according to our agreement, we expected that we would. And all of my budget projections, if we had gotten the money that we were supposed to get, we would always have break even or surplus. We wouldn't be in a deficit. So that sets the stage for what we've been dealing with, right? So we come into this year, I stepped into the role of the CEO in 2022. And that's coming off the pandemic. So test score, everything is crazy, trying to get new teachers and everybody on board, new administrators, because things were disarray coming out of the pandemic. And so you're trying to stabilize your organization. And finally, I got a new team in place, and we began an upward trend. By the time we hit 2025, there's different measurements that you have. One called the school effectiveness review that they told you about, where they come in and they evaluate your school. They look throughout the whole school. In 2022, we were developing. So out of the 12 categories, 8 of our categories are developing. When we hit 2025, 9 out of 12 are effective. So we're essentially effective. We go from developing to effective in the 3 years that I've been an operator. Then another one of the categories that they talk to you about that's very predictive of the future of the school is the 5 Essential Survey, right? It's very predictive of school success. In 2022, we were not effective, we were low. Once again, coming out of the pandemic, it was hard for anybody to be super effective. But by the time we get to 2025, all of our scores have gone up by double digits, 10 to 42% increases. That takes us into the developing range, which to me is good. We're making progress. We're trajecting upwards. So we go into developing. Now, why is that significant? Because if you were to look at our renewal report that they give us, in the category of academic success, that's where the 5 Essential Survey lands. On our report, they marked it not effective. That's red. So you got red, that allows that top category to be called not effective. However, our scores were developing. So I can't understand why if we scored developing, you put not effective on our report. But that certainly would weigh that top category down and bring it into the not effective category. We keep going down that rubric and they get to the family survey. On the family survey in 2025, we scored an 88 in overall satisfaction. Anybody want to take a guess what an 88 would be on a scale of effective, developing, or not effective? I would think an 88 would be effective, right? We got the score of not effective. These are documents. These are things that they have us go through, and we score them, and then they put on this document for non-renewal, we're not effective. So there's more red on our document. Then you go down into the area of the, they talk about the audit, and they talk about financial management, and you're not a financial success, right? And if you read through a document, it'll talk about you guys have $250,000 worth of accounts payable, you're negative $9,000 in net assets, and you only project to have 14 days of cash on hand. If we did not get 23% taken from us for 3 straight years, we would have gotten at least $700,000 to $800,000 more per year. We would have never been negative. We would have never been negative. They took the money, right? And so they said, basically, because we can. So we got voted to be closed on the 14th, and then on January 28th, the Maryland State Board of Education ruled in the favor of the charter schools. Remember, the first time when I went in to challenge them, January 10th of 2023, I was one of 8 schools who were going to challenge. When I got my notice on January 18th, I said to the rest of the team, I'm sorry, I got to back out because now I got another thing to deal with. But this time, 14 of us charter schools said, we're going to challenge again before fiscal year 26. We began back in March. I was one of 14 schools that challenged what they were doing. And on January 28th of this year, the Maryland State Board of Education ruled in our favor. A declaratory ruling that said, you were never supposed to be taking more than the 2%, give them back their money. Now, that's late for me. Right? If I had been getting it the whole time, I could have been paying everything. We would have had no debt. We would have had more than 60 days of cash on hand. But that's the result of them making their decision that they're going to ignore the state of Maryland. So where does that leave us? Our school is now closed, or scheduled to be closed in June. We have appealed to the state of Maryland. And this is really interesting, and I'll end with this, is last Friday, we finally get the notice from them that says, here's your report that from the vote is saying this is the result of your vote. And in the letter, it says you have 30 days from the day of this letter to appeal to the state of Maryland. Now, according to everything that I've been able to discover, it's 30 days from the date of the decision, which is the vote, which was January 14th, not 30 days from February 13th, according to everything I've discovered in the MSBE. So why would you send me a letter on the very last day? Mind you, February 13th is the 30th day after the vote. They could have sent it to me day 2, day 3, day 5. They sent it to me on day 30 that here's the ruling and you get 30 days from the date on this letter. Is that intentional so that we don't appeal or we don't know the facts? I don't know, but if you're going to say that we got not effective on the 5 essential when we got developing, if you're going to say that we got not effective on the family survey when we were effective, if you're going to tell everybody that we mismanaged money because of our financial situation, which you caused, why wouldn't you send me something at the last day that I can't appeal? So that's my testimony for, going through this process. Now, for those of you who don't know, we're special. You talk about every charter school is supposed to be something special. We are. Our young men, the families choose us because we're an all-boys school. We're the only choice in the state for all-boys schools, the only choice in the entire state. But in a city like Baltimore, where the fate of young African-American males is terrible. They're going to jail or they're dying. They're squeegee kids, they're selling drugs. We start a school to say, we're going to change the trajectory of all these boys. And what has happened since we opened our door in 2015, we've been graduating boys from our school. Now, those boys, our first class that graduated from us in 2018, graduated from high school in 2022. They graduated at a rate of 85%. The next year, 92%. In 2023, 24, 92%, 25 that just passed 86%. On average, we're at about 90% of our boys that come through our school, we track every boy. And I think the one thing that happens in common, all these boys go to different schools. They don't go to the same school. They go to different schools, yet they're graduating at a 90% rate, when the city's average is 60% for the same population. We serve a specific purpose. It's not going to, they'll say, well, they're not an academic success. Trust me, our test scores and our cohort retention rate equals at least 10 to 12 of their schools of the same level. They equate to ours. So the thing that we're doing different is that special sauce of bringing these boys to an environment where they are surrounded by love, surrounded by a whole lot of men. A whole lot we probably have more men in our building than any other school, but these boys need the mentorship, they need the fatherhood, they need everything that we pour into the structure, the things that we do to build them up in belief that they can graduate from high school. And over half those boys are now in college that are graduating from high school. So we serve a special purpose. I just wanted to share that with you as we're on our way out. We don't know what will happen with the appeal, but we all need to know what we have done here, because I believe it could have been avoided, and I don't know why there's misinformation about what we actually scored, because I believe if you had scored us in the 5 Essential Survey as developing, that top category that said not effective might have said developing. And if you did not penalize us for what you did to us financially in the governance and finance section, that could have been developing. We could have been developing, effective developing, and we could still be qualified. But if you're giving 2 not effectives, you're guaranteed to close us. And so I'll wrap it up there.
So
Thank you very much.
No, Mr. Avent, thank you for your testimony, but thank you even more so for your efforts in educating our young men in the city. It is appreciated. I do want to go to Councilmember Ramos, as your school has actually been located in her district. I know she has some comments as well, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it, and thanks for giving the director the time to explain some of the things happening here. I want to say that the school, and I think any school, our communities really are our schools become part of our communities. And this particular school is part of the community. What I've seen with the young men when I go, when you first walk in, they're shaking people's hands, looking in the eye, and they're very confident. And I think that's really important. And I also know when we see our young men from this school and other schools, we know where they came from. We know. And so I think that's really important. I think that also when we're talking about, Baltimore City has a very strong tradition of single-sex education, very strong tradition. We've got 3 women's schools, public schools, but we have, unless we keep this school open, we will have no public boys' school. And so I think it's incumbent upon the school system and us and anybody interested in educating our young men that we figure out a way to keep a boys' school, a public boys' school open and thriving in the city. We have to do that. And so I, have supported the school since I've been a council person. I know my predecessor did before me. And I'm hopeful that we can find a resolution here. I get the accountability that our charter schools have to have, but I do think that we need to figure out a way to make sure that we have a place for our young men in a single-sex education realm, because there is value in that. I am sorry that I have to excuse myself. I represent the City Council on the COC Continuum of Care Board for Homeless Services, and they are meeting right now, and I'm late, but I wanted to make sure that I heard the presentation and express my support, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Of course, and glad to have you. Appreciate that service. I don't know if you have another comment, but I know next on the list is Mr. Leo Burrows, and I'm going to keep going down the list. So, and as you come up to the podium, just please press the button with the person on it and go right ahead. Everybody's doing it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and audience, citizens of Baltimore City and the state of Maryland. I'm the president and founder of the Roots of Scouting organization, Roots of Scouting Incorporated. We're in our 46th year of service to the community. We are a Pan-African organization that focuses on the educational needs of African people throughout the diaspora. What I thought would be the best approach in this circumstance is to utilize what I submitted to the Board of School Commissioners of Baltimore City on January the 8th at their hearing, to present it to you, because that encapsulates what I feel is relevant in terms of the support that we will continue to give and always give to the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys. Roots of Scouting's president. On January 5th, the Roots of Scouting Board of Directors voted to recommend that the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys contract and operational authority be extended for at least 10 more years, and that the recommendations of CEO Sonia Santelises to close the school be totally rejected for the following reasons. The school has a 90% graduation rate, and its curriculum epitomizes academic excellence. Tutorial and remedial student education is an ongoing part of all grade level instruction. A uniform dress code and behavioral discipline is mandated. Peer-student relationships and respect is fostered and promoted. Black heritage and culture is taught, valued, and encouraged. Parent-teacher involvement has been a prime motivator of successful student programming. Our conclusion: the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys is a prototype of Black male education. It's in a class of its own, and all other Black charter public schools are role models of community self-determination, which must be supported financially and politically. African people cannot survive unless we control the education of our children. The math and reading scores of Black children in Baltimore City neighborhood schools are the lowest in the state of Maryland. We're speaking statistically over the last year or two. I think we know that. Chronic absenteeism is more than 50% in many schools. White women teachers, however, are the primary demographic incentivized to teach in Black schools. Did you know that some of our schools have 60, 70% of white teachers in our schools? Am I hating on white folks? No, not at all. The reality is, I graduated from Frederick Douglass High School in 1960. I'm a part of the civil rights movement. I'm a civil rights leader and community organizer. But I'm struck by the fact that there are no incentivized efforts at ensuring equality in terms of faculty for Black men and Black teachers. I don't see what I had. In a segregated system, I had Black teachers in elementary school, high school, college, middle school, junior, we call it junior high school then. The Santelises administration and the Board of School Commissioners have not been an academic success. And that's what I'm saying. You're putting down the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys, but you can't measure up. You're at the bottom of the ladder in the state of Maryland as one of the worst school systems in terms of math and reading scores. It was bad during Jim Crow. Hell, it's worse now. Why? I don't understand it. We ask you to cease and desist attacking legitimate efforts to educate Black children. Now, let me close. We got new buildings. I have no objection to brand new structures. It's very, very important. But that's not a substitute for curriculum. That's not a substitute for ensuring that the standards that we mandate for our, in this case, our boys and our people, are not second to none. And so I get the impression, I'm particularly disappointed in the mayor. He's telling me about new building. Great. What? You're a graduate of this system. What the hell's going on here when you're the graduate of the system and you're not upfront about ensuring that we are given a fair shake in this realm of academics. The president of city council, I don't know where he stands. The vice president, she's here. I'm not sure where she stands. I think, Ms. Middleton, you've been in the council 17 years. I might be wrong, 16, 17? 19 years. I want to see from folks who are here, black, white, green, purple, a resolve that speaks to the mayor and says, you must go forward. The council must dictate and prioritize the education needs of the children in Baltimore City. I don't see that. I see folks reverting to the state of Maryland. Well, they have jurisdiction. No, you've got jurisdiction. That's right. It's the same Democratic Party that rules here. And I'm going to end, because I know he's getting ready to hit the gavel. But I'm saying to you that I remember Andreas Alonso. Do you? Sonia Santelises worked with him. Andreas lowered the grade point average, I'm told, from 70 to 60 as passing. We have Sonia Santelises, her girls went to Garrison Forest, and that's her right. $38,000 a year. She's getting $400,000 in total benefits. No, we've got to hold folks accountable. And am I being threatening? I hope I'm threatening the longevity of elected officials to say that if you can't do what we need to have done, if you can't do our bidding, we need to get you out of office. We're damn sick and tired of being bullied by the Board of School Commissioners and Sonia Santelises and the likes of hers. She's served too often at the behest of the white power structure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. I appreciate your comments and your historical perspective. One of the things that I will note, and I say this as an educator, as a father, as an HBCU grad, we do have a challenge in terms of the teacher pipeline for our schools. And there are a host of reasons why, but a couple things, and I say this as a first generation graduate. What happens with a lot of our black men, especially when they get to college, we think about the cost of going to college, whether they take on student loan debt and what have you. And oftentimes the career pathways that are chosen are outside of education due to the low pay that we oftentimes see in education. So again, I think there's some things writ large we need to be looking at in terms of our educational system and also provide those pathways. I think about the Call Me Mr. program that reaches out to HBCUs in terms of trying to get them into the education pipeline. But again, I think we have to be more intentional about that as a country, as a state, and as a city. So again, I appreciate that element as well, and we do care. I'm going to keep going down the list. I see Sheena Smith.
There's a parent that has to go to work. Can she go in my
Sure, please come forward and give your name.
her place, so we switch.
No, it's fine. Please come forward. You could use the podium. It's fine, or sit there, whatever. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can see you better either way. All right. So, please give me your name as well, and then go to your presentation or your testimony. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Tatia Johnson. I'm a parent at Baltimore Collegiate School for the Boys. My son entered Baltimore Collegiate School for the Boys in 6th grade. He came from Baltimore County Schools, entering at low academics. So as a witness here today, I'm coming forth. He is now progressing on academic level, grade level. He's coming from Baltimore County School, as I mentioned before, to Baltimore City Charter Schools. So as a live testimony academically, the school is a success story in my behalf. I also wanted to touch bases on the story behind the school itself. It's an all-boy college prep school that exposes the boys to explore things that's out of their norm in the inner city schools or inner city urban neighborhoods. Also teaching them how to be gentlemen and modeling and guiding them to be positive men, to grow up to be positive men, which play a tremendous impact and foundation of the mindset of of the Black community. I think this is a unique school that will be gently appreciated to remain open, not just for the staff or the parents, but for the children in the community. That's all I really have to say with the mindset of young boys these days in the inner cities. You know, they go through a lot of trials and tribulations. I think this school have a major impact on their mindset for us, the foundation of building their own families and growing up to be, you know, good, positive citizens in Baltimore City. Thank you.
No, Ms. Johnson, I want to thank you for coming out today, spending the time, because we know we're thinking about the balancing act that a lot of our parents are doing. You took the time to come out here and be with us today. So again, appreciate your testimony as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, keep going down the list. I see Sheena Smith. Go for it.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to allow me to testify. On January the 8th, I was, oh, you want me to state my name first? Sheena Smith. Sorry about that. I am basically a 64-year-old citizen here, and I've been on the ground with Brother Leo as well, and so many other issues. But on this particular issue, Sister Eartha contacted many of us, and we came out to a meeting regarding the annual review. So on January the 8th, I was in attendance with over 150 supporters who came out to show unwavering support for Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys under the leadership of CEO Dr. Edwin Avant, Principal Calvin Bridges, the staff, and most importantly, the students who is making an enormous progress. While we understand and respect the team who conducted and prepared the annual review for BC SFB, which is Baltimore City School for Boys Collegiate. However, what the review data failed to include was the data that the school is operating and making progress in spite of the fact that they only received a limited amount of funds, which they should have been taken 2% and 25% was taken. While we, the supporters, support the school and we feel it's an asset to our community, we are saddened that the children have been traumatized, as well as the staff and our entire community. I'm an auntie of over 100 nieces and nephews. Education is key. I've had some that went the wrong way. I have some that succeeded. But one of the things that I found that is very important is that we have a positive environment. So I took it upon myself to visit the school and meet with the staff and some of the students, and it was a very welcoming and warm and positive environment. We understand that Baltimore City has a lot of challenges, but the fact of the matter, this review was unfair. If you do not take all of the facts into consideration, we cannot come up with an adequate analysis. And the fact of the matter, I think we all should stand and give Dr. Edwin Avant a round of applause for operating and taking care of our children under budget. 90% success rate, and the team over there, because he couldn't do it alone. And I just want us to understand, we say so often young black males, nobody cares about them. Well, this school has shown us that they do. I got on the ground and I walked to those businesses around that school. Many of them didn't know that the school existed, but several of them allowed me to get petitions signed in support of the school. So I ask that this commission, city council, that you not only consider looking further into this matter, but I would like to have the answer, what really happened to the other 23% that should have gone to the school? Who actually has it? Because it sounds like it's some form of misappropriation going on. For 3 years in a row, that doesn't make sense. And our children are hurting. And I'm hurt. I don't even have children. I'm a flight attendant. I don't really have to be here. My life is good. But Dr. King and those who came before us, and it wasn't all blacks, it was all races that joined in to make this world a better place. And we must do that on behalf of our children. And I thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Ms. Smith. We're going to keep going with public testimony, but I am going to ask the school system to talk about that funding formula change and if possible. So, all right.
No, we have
can't. We're in
pending lawsuits
pending,
on
yeah.
that, so.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right.
We can't address any.
Well, no. Maybe I'll say it like this, and maybe you can think about however you can address any of this, which is not about any specific school in terms of any change, but
We're
the
in
pro-
a legal situation, we're in a legal, open legal case around the funding formula.
Right. So, no, that's fine. I mean, I just want you to make sure you said something about it. So again, we know that so put it this way, we know that it's an issue that's out there. So the issues that we're dealing with at the state or at this level are not just about the school closure process and those maybe appealing that closure, but then there's also the formula dispute as well. Is that what you're saying? So there are two separate things that are going on right now that we can't really get into.
Yeah, there's legal cases going on both.
Right, so I just want to make sure that, again, there was two separate issues. Did you have something you wanted to jump in and add,
Yeah.
Councilman Torrance, our resident JD?
Angela, if you could provide us with the math is related to a formula, not just to a specific school, but like, what are you going to factor? Like, do they have a child that has special needs versus if they're English second learners, how much they would get in terms of like that? Just to give like how it's calculated to get to a certain number. I think that would be helpful without going into specifics about a school.
A lot about our formula is under dispute in this particular lawsuit, so we really can't go into the formula very much. We can certainly give briefings to folks, and we follow the blueprint. The blueprint's very specific. It legislates down to the student level about the amount of funding, to your point, that needs to be received, whether you're special ed, whether you're a multi-language learner. It specifies how much the district can hold back. There's a lot that's very clear about this, but we just can't get into it because of the pending legal
That's what I'm
issues.
suggesting that you send us so that we have an understanding of it, because you can go by a school population and then eventually go, I see X number of students, this is how much you would typically get for this type of student with these things. That way we just have what the ingredients are, but not getting to specific outcomes for each individual student. That way they're not in their legal limbo with giving it to us.
So thank you for that. And again, I think we'll take you up an opportunity to share additional information when the time is appropriate. So again, an appropriate channel. So thank you for that. I'm going to keep going down the list. If I mispronounce your name or if I can't read handwriting, please forgive me. It looks like a Mark Cannon. All right.
It's my writing.
Yours is probably better than mine anyway. So anyway.
Hi, Mark Cannon.
Press the button on the right. There, it'll light up. There it is.
All right. Okay, can y'all hear me now? Mark Cannon, retired VA employee and veteran. Also parent, foster parent, and step parent of 8. 6 went through the Baltimore City school system. So I did a lot of volunteering and stuff. Not only that, been part of We Are Us for the last 8 years, going out taking resources to the community, putting my life on the line. A lot of people don't have any idea what these young people are going through. Tim Tootin, God rest his soul, said that we have 10,000 young people homeless in Maryland, thousands right here in Baltimore. Dr. Bunley, who's now the head of the Office of African American Male Engagement, he let us know when people were saying, the murders went down, this, that, and the other. In Baltimore City, we have less than 6,000 people, 600,000 people. The way that they do the murders is 5 per 100,000, which means in Baltimore City, we should have no more than 30 murders a year. So when we get down to that, then, maybe we can talk. But we've lost 2,000 of our young, mostly black men to murder from their peers from 2015 to the murders went down in 2023. This school, breakfast, lunch, dinner, all that kind of stuff the tangibles, the other schools that they were gonna close. We always talk about our kids need trades and all that kind of stuff, man. You know, I hope that y'all go over and go to this man's school. The young people came out when they was gonna close it the first time, 3 years ago. The whole community rose up and they kept it open. You know, why is it that that's the only boys' school in Maryland and we can't find a way to, and I was a teacher's aide for 3.5 years. Why can't we find a way, like he said, and like this brother said, why after that first 3 years didn't they go over, talk to this man, you know, and come up with something? We put all the charter schools in one basket. They're not. And it ain't about charter schools, it's about our young men. I'm out in the street. You know, we got a 15-year-old girl already murdered. We had a shootout the other day in Mondawmin. None of that's normal. 4,000 car stealings. 4,000 400 carjackings. None of that stuff is normal. What's going on? And you said Carl Stokes is your mentor. Well, I'm part of National Action Network. When he came and talked to Al, Larry Young had him come and speak to us. Former Councilman Stokes was there. And former Councilman Stokes said that Sandra Lisa told him to his face, I don't like you. That's why I'm closing your school.
Thank you again for the presentation. Thank you for being a foster parent. Thank you for being a teacher's aide and all the work you do in the community. Ms. Eartha Harris?
Good afternoon. My name is Eartha Harris, and I'm here as a community activist. Some of you may not know me because I've been involved a lot. Actually ran for city council 5 times, so. One of the things I think is important to get back on track is this process, and that's the reason why I want to say, if we're here to hear how the board comes up with a decision to close Baltimore City schools, I hope the city council is listening. Because it's so important when people say, well, you know what? These people don't do nothing. You guys do all of this sort of stuff all the time. All the time they have these process. The process that I experienced even with the city when they said they was going to close the school. So as she said, oh, the community can come out and speak. So we all ran down North Avenue, the community, the parents, the students. And what did we get? A bunch of chaos. It took them hours to even come and set up the meeting. Then they said they wasn't prepared and you don't have room for enough people. And so you get all this craziness going on. And this is supposed to be the process, as you guys say, that we are supposed to be able to utilize so we can get to the bottom of things. So I'm saying what we need to do is understand if we, whoever we are so educated. There's a lot of people that got degrees on top of degrees, don't have common sense. If you want to hear for the community and you think the community is important and it's supposed to be an impact, I don't care how many statistics we have on the board. If you're not going to listen and you tell these parents, okay, regardless whether you want to have your school open and stay, whatever, but we're going to close it down because what you're saying is not important because you don't understand all of the factors that go in. We need money, we need structures, we need heating. Then stop asking people to come out. Now, also what I have a problem is you guys all know each other. If you're not gonna use your common sense and say, yeah, I know about a bunch of procedures, but let's say, hey, if this guy has the only school in Baltimore that's solving the problem that we have as African American, we ourselves, with any titles to our names, is gonna go over there. And I think, to me, this councilman, I can't remember your name, the young man at the end, let's get things before they escalate. You know, this school been in existence for years. Let's start looking at whatever anybody can do without y'all titles, or how do we support this? If you have to come out your own pockets and write checks and give this man the money that he needs. If you can go over there and shake those young men's hands. We're getting too far away in this city with too many people that's in position to say they're in the good of the people, and the people don't feel it. You cannot stop somebody from shooting somebody, but you can stop somebody from thinking about shooting somebody if you yourself say, I got a good program for you. I got to get this information out to the community. I got to let you know as an individual person without no title to my name that I can make a difference. A lot of people told Edwin it was no purpose for him to even come down here. It was Lou Fields who showed us the process that we had a city council that cares. We have a city council that has an education committee. I didn't even know that. Okay? Why did those people come together? Because they're concerned about education. Then act like it. Do not wait till stuff come to a head and say, oh, we need to wonder why schools are closing and why our kids are not being educated. You know why. That's why you're in this seat, to come up with a solution to what you already know. And it is a difficult process. Take on the difficult process. That's why you're in these seats. You're supposed to be able to do the hard work that needs to be done. None of this is going to be simple. But while you're doing that, please take common sense. It is no reason, I don't care what they said about that school should be closing. I don't know how we should stop it, but I'm going to hold myself accountable and I'm going to hold everybody else accountable. You call the governor, you call the next process with the appeal, and trying to talk to those people so we can get a resolution. Because if we don't, every year, guys, we go through the same thing, don't care what problems happen in Baltimore, that we have a group of people that's in position that the people don't feel like you'll have any power. We got boarded up houses, we got miseducated kids, we got struggling businesses, me, Terrence, and a lot of us are struggling. And then we got all these people with great ideas, but we don't feel the impact. I'm saying as a community, I don't want to be emotional, right? Well, this is not about emotional. It's about common sense, and we as a people acting like we're powerful, acting like we're smart, acting like we can take on the hard challenges, acting like we have common sense. It is no way that the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys don't get the proper resources that they need to keep that school open. Thank you, Eartha Harris.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Thank you for also talking about process. Again, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this hearing today, so that folks are aware of everything that goes into the process as it relates to closures and those decisions. The other point that I will make is that as members of the City Council, we are elected to represent communities. Again, so it's important for us to hear your voice, hear your words. Yes, there are distinctions in terms of the decisions that the Board of School Commissioners makes and the recommendations as well. But again, we want to make sure that we are aware of the process. And as you can hear from some of our colleagues, what some of our questions are as well. So understand that you are being heard. Also, I see on the list, Mr. Lou Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How much time do I have?
Adjust the mic too. Yep.
Yes, how much time do we have?
Just a couple minutes, but go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to try to be respectful of the time, but I want to thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and the members of the committee for this important hearing today. Because as we sit here, we are also thinking about Reverend Jesse Jackson and some of his most famous words, keep hope alive. And that's what you folks represent to us. You are found hope in this process. One of the things I would recommend, whenever there's a recommendation from the school's board superintendent, it should come before the council as well. You folks should have, as our elected representatives, a say in what happens at the school board. Today, I have a little quote from Frederick Douglass. It's in a book entitled, Education and Justice, How Public Schools Fail African-American Males, Reverend Augustus Corbett. He's also an attorney. And as far as what he writes, a quote from Mr. Douglass, it reads, without education, African Americans, live within the narrow, dark, and grimy walls of ignorance. Education, on the other hand, means emancipation. It means light and liberty. It means the uplifting of the soul of man into the glorious light of truth, the light by which men can be made free. To deny education to any people is one of the greatest crimes against human nature. Frederick Douglass. Today, you heard from all the supporters and many more who are not here who support the continuation of this particular school. The school is special to us. We love this school. I was there at the hearing on January 8th when a young child, student of the school, he actually broke down in tears with the thought of his school being closed. When you look at the Baltimore City Public School Board of Commissioners, if you take a 20-year look from the year 2000 up to today, you're going to find scandal after scandal. And these are the very people, 6 in this case, with a recommendation from another person, who seek to close a school or any school. We have seen no heat in the winter in these schools. We've seen no air conditioning in the summer. It broke our hearts to turn on our TV, council persons, and see our students sitting in a classroom with coats on. It broke our heart to see students who couldn't even drink the water at some of our public schools. Again, school board commissioners. We're seeing grade changing scandals, social promotion scandals. We're seeing salary, over 3 dozen people making $100,000 at one time over here at that school. We've seen underperforming schools, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 8th grade. A recent report, November of 2025, from the Maryland Center for Economy over on Charles Street. A recent report of 3rd, 4th, and 8th grade students in math comparing Baltimore City to state averages. The state is averaging a little over 33%. Our city schools, 12 to 8%. It's sad. In January of 2024, the chair and the vice chair of the School Board of Commissioners resigned immediately over internal disputes. Not to mention how much money we're losing, giving back, having to return $350,000 to the state, paying over $9 million for fake enrollment to reach new income for themselves. What we have today, I believe, is a school board of commissioners that deserves a vote of no confidence. If you look at their history, in the last 20 years, again, it's been scandal after scandal. And now we see, based on a recommendation from one person, that 6 people get to decide which of our schools stay open, which that closes. I don't think that's the way it should be. Why should 6 people have the kind of power that just arbitrarily, looking at their numbers and not the school's actual numbers, they can decide just on one date, we're gonna close schools. I think it's time for the City Council of Baltimore to figure out what type of reforms that you guys need to initiate legislatively to change who has the power over our schools and over our citizens and our students. We know the state provides a lot of money to the school system, but the City Council of Baltimore, you are really, at the city level, you are our last resort. And if we can't turn to the people we elected for support and help, where do we go? I think it's upon the City Council to look deep into this issue, to see what type of legislation you can come up with to take this power back from 6 people to decide which of our schools open and close. That's not what we vote for. These are only, in fact, the 6 people who voted are not even elected by us. They are appointees. That is just too much power that the City Council of Baltimore in 2026 should sit by and let happen. You guys should be questioning, why are you doing this at this particular time when, as you can see, the school has tremendous support, tremendous support. If they wasn't doing a good job, you think parents would be sending their children back to the school year after year? You look around, you can see their students are graduating, they're making it in life, they're getting higher education degrees. Derek Queen, I think he's a student from there. He's now playing with the New Orleans Pelicans, all because he got a foundation right here in Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys. So I think what we are looking for you to do is find some power. As a legislative body of this city, find some power to stop what's happening with the Baltimore School Board of Commissioners. They're just, I don't understand how they're working over there. They're taking money, they're moving money, they don't tell people how their money comes. I emailed you, all of you, charter school fund articles from May of last year and July of last year, that this issue has been going on now, as the school board, the state says, over 20 years. So unless you take some liberty and have some workshops and determine how do we move forward in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Council Vice President Middleton, you had a comment over here? Okay, so I will keep going down the list. I see Sarah Holly.
Thank you. Again, my name is Sarah Holly. I'm really troubled. I'm really, really troubled. When I was in algebra class in the 7th grade, the teacher said, you always start with what you have in order to get what you need or what you want. What we have is we have thousands of homeless children. We have thousands of children who have left Baltimore City schools who can't read. They were, quote, graduated out of a high school and they can't read. Yet we wonder what's going on with our students, with our children. We have students that clean windshields so they can make money to get by during the day or during the night or to get whatever it is they can give. We ride right past them, we don't look them in the eye, we don't talk with them. And we wonder what's wrong with our students, what's wrong with our children. We have a mayor that puts millions of dollars into a failed security program, but he bypasses a lot of the things that our children need. And we wonder what's wrong with our children. We have an administration, a president by the name of Trump. We have an administration who is actively trying to erase our history. So I can't wrap my head around why we are here today discussing how we can erase the future of our children. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. Couple more and we'll be through. Tyrone Bose.
Hello, everybody, council, and concerned citizens. My name is Lieutenant Colonel retired Tyrone Bose. I have 2 combat tours in Iraq. I have no children in the Baltimore City Public Schools, but I'm here. I also run a plumbing, heating, and cooling business. I stopped working on a project to come down here and testify. That's how important I see this hearing. To me, and it should be to all the citizens of Baltimore. And I commend Dr. Yvette for his steadfastness and his leadership. I would serve with Dr. Yvette anywhere in the world if I had to go somewhere with some men or some women to serve and to care for those people. All right, because he's exemplary. He's had a success rate of 90%. And y'all heard this before, of getting these young men through high school once they leave his school, which is a middle school. We all know that. That alone should be enough to keep this school in business. The city cannot match that. So he's doing more with less. He's not getting paid what Dr. Sonalise is getting paid. Yet, she can't match his record. Okay? So actually she's telling him that she's gonna shut the school down, but she cannot do as well as he's doing, as well as performance and results with people. And what he is doing also is putting a lie to the myth that young black boys cannot be taught in the city.
Yeah,
okay, sorry. So I'm just a little passionate about this. And again, I don't have kids in the Baltimore City public schools. My kids are grown, and they're all doing well because they had a good education, all right? I did not have them enrolled in Baltimore City public schools. all right? I moved to the county, I'm telling you. That's why I did it. They had better schools. At that time, Baltimore County had one of the best school systems, according to what they were saying back then, in the country. And that's why I moved there. And if you want our kids to be as successful as, all kids should be as successful as mine when they get grown. They should have that opportunity. The best defense against crime is opportunity. That's the best, all right? I have no kids in his school or any other school in Baltimore City, but I donate $100 a month, recurring from my bank account to that school, because that's how serious I take it. And with that 90% success rate of getting kids through high school, and the city, by the way, has a 60% success rate by comparison, that school should be kept open as the model of what works. And things should be taken from that school and implemented in the failing city schools to make those schools 90% success as well. So if nothing else, we need to keep the school open as a model. Maybe the city council can find some money from somewhere, since they've been getting cheated out of their money to begin with, and send it to them, because the crux of the matter seems to be that they didn't have enough money when the money they were supposed to be getting was been withheld from them in the first place. So that's sort of like a catch-22, and there seems to be a lot of tomfoolery going on with assessments about the school that shouldn't be. The concern should be the kids. It should be these young boys, these young black males. And to say that this is the other reason is this is the last charter school for boys in Baltimore City. And guess what? Boys in Baltimore City have problems too, not just the girls. We all agree on that, right? All right, so I hope that you will do whatever it takes to keep the school open, if for nothing else but the model that puts the lie to the myth that young black boys cannot be taught in the inner city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, your commitment to education and to coming out today. Terrence Dix.
Peace, family. Good afternoon.
Please.
Mom always say, introduce yourself. My name is Terrence. I'm Terrence Dixon, also known as Chef T, owner of the Terra Cafe, and rock out with Cheroloff Consulting and the Bamboo Project. I've been working with Baltimore City Schools for about 18 years since we opened up the restaurant, working with youth. One of the key things that I've found out in those years is that there are lack of resources that are truly focused on them, giving them opportunity. All right. As I sit back and I look at Baltimore being a blue-collar town, and as I see that the resources that are here, I'm trying to say it nicely, that they've closed technical school after technical school. When I'm in Mervo, working with the cooking, showing kids not just how to make a sandwich, but showing them how to possibly own a business, feed their family, and just deal with life. You know, one of the things is that I came today with the ideas to support, to say something. And I realized that, guess what? I'm down here because of an accounting error. I'm down here because this school is being closed because they didn't have enough finances, and a few other things, but the basics of the finances. And now those finances have been found that, guess what? They got more than enough money, all right? And I heard this word earlier. You guys are the last defense for the citizens of Baltimore, for government and everything. You're our voice. So I come to you today to ask you to use your voice and do what needs to be right with this school. All right, there are very few resources for kids in our community. And I hear everybody says black, but this is just not a black situation. This is a Baltimore situation with everything that's going on. Every time I turn on the news, I hear a carjacking, I hear this, that, and the other. And guess what? I think a little differently. I look at that when you got a 13 or 14-year-old that has the ability to find out how to get a gun, has the mindset to go and rob somebody, has the ability to get in a car and drive it off, that means that they're not lacking. That means that we are. That means that we're not putting the right things in front of them to fill their toolbox of life for them to be awesome. The things that are happening in Baltimore right now today that plague our youth, we will see that ROI, that return on that investment, in about 7 to 10 years. And right now, it does not look good. As you listen on the news and you hear about 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old with 3 and 4 felonies, guess what? They can't get hired. They might not get into some colleges. They're going to be limited to what they're able to do in the future. So even if they made a mistake now, it's going to be hard to change it later. The Boys Collegiate School does something different. It gets them when they're young. It puts principles, boundaries, and guidelines in place for them. It's up to them to use it later, but at least we've filled their toolbox with things that are useful and things that mean something, all right? So like, once again, all right, I see everybody up here. I know y'all been tired all day long. Stretch out, breathe, do a little yoga move. But more important than anything else, this is one thing that does not need to be pushed to the back. So many times when I look at news and stuff of that nature, I see how we are able to make great plights for big business, for development, but when it comes to the human element of Baltimore City, we fall short. And it's kind of crazy because you're in a great city that has Johns Hopkins, you have Morgan, University of Baltimore, University of Maryland, the Baltimore Art College, all right? It's so many schools and so many smart people here. I'm really kind of like boggled. Why are we having trouble with the small stuff? This is small. Our kids need us. This is small. That cool school needs to stay open. This is small. We can find money for everything else. I hear these great absorbent amount of budgets of $500 million, $900 million to do something, and guess what? That's our money. That's the money for us. But it's going building cities off the other side of the city, and it's not going into our schools. There's no way that we should continue to have the neglect of our youth, because guess what? We're gonna have to deal with that return on that investment. Thank you again. My name is Terrence Dixon, owner of the Terra Cafe, owner of Terra Loft Consulting and the Bamboo Project, all right? And I see a better day for Baltimore, but I think that it really starts right now and here, and for you guys to make that decision. And not just on this subject, but it's so many other layers of this onion in Baltimore City that needs to change. And it's kind of sad. You know, people believe in you. They vote for you. You knock on the doors. You come to the fundraisers. And then what happens when we get in these seats? I don't know where they flatten you at, but it gets flat. It's like we become the second thought or the last thought, all right? Thank you so much once again. Have an awesome day on purpose. Give thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon, for your testimony. Also appreciate you continuing to operate your fine establishment, even given some of the challenges that you face on a daily basis. So again, that doesn't get lost on us as well. I did see a Mr. Kolick also listed to present, but testify, but looks like he may have stepped out. And I don't see anyone else signed to testify or online. But what I will say, even pursuant to the last set of comments, that members of the council, we are elected to represent the people, and oftentimes we take a lot of incoming fire, whether it be in our meetings or whether it be online or social media and other venues. And so we understand it can be challenging, and we also recognize that we work hard every day, as do our teachers, as do our administrators, our CEO of schools, as well as our Board of School Commissioners. So again, we want to make sure we look at, the best of what we are providing and understand that people are coming in with the best of intentions. And at the same time, we can have disagreements and challenges with the way that we see things transpiring. So again, I appreciate folks who came out today. I do want to provide any wrap up or final comments from the school system, and any comments that you want to share for the committee as we begin to close out.
Thank you. I appreciate City Council having a hearing today about this. This is a very difficult topic, and we do a lot of, the team does a lot of thoughtful work to have a very thoughtful process to engage folks and give people ample time to give testimony in multiple hearings in the community. We go back and forth with the community. We have school board hearings. There's lots of time for back and forth. There's a very thoughtful, comprehensive process to overview schools that uses research-based methods to actually consider outcomes. We look at people's outcomes in comparison to the district as a whole. So when you hear reports about their schools' outcomes, and they sound high, but it depends on how it compares to the rest of the school district. The school district also has worked very hard over many years to address a lot of the things that people raised. I suggest that maybe people should listen to a wide variety of news sources and not just one, because there's a lot of different information about the school system than the one news source that was cited several times here. For instance, I think this is the 13th year or 14th year, I've lost track, of clean audits that the school system has had since before Dr. Santelises has been there. We also have greatly increased the number of art teachers that we have. We have vastly increased the number of critical courses like AP courses. I think there's a 300% increase in the number of students of color taking AP courses, and I believe 150% increase. I will check these numbers. These are off the top of my head. I wasn't prepared for this, but I think it's 150% increase in the number of students getting a qualifying score. Our KRA results have consistently outperformed the state in terms of their students being prepared, who attend our pre-Ks, being prepared for elementary school. This year, the state changed their metric, and so it's hard to compare to prior years, but this year, our students, our disadvantaged students, our multilingual learners, and our special ed and one other category of students all outperformed the state significantly in terms of their kindergarten readiness rates. We've seen increases in our literacy rates across all metrics. We have seen increase in our graduation rates. We've seen increase in our math rates. We have seen significant, gains in terms of the range of courses that we have available to students and the caliber and quality of courses that we are offering to students. So there's been tremendous progress in the school system. We've opened 28 schools. I think we've cut the ribbon on 28 schools, is that right? And made sure that we've provided thoughtful programming and rich programming to young people there. So it's a different school system. We've also largely held enrollment. Last year we had 1,000, the first time in a long time we had 1,000 student increase in enrollment in the city, which is a testament to what's happening in the school system. Our drop in enrollment has not been we largely mirrored the district and the city, but our enrollment has largely held flat and declined at a slower rate since Dr. Santelises has been here than the city's population decline. We saw an increase last year that was larger than the city's population decline. This year, due to the national context, we've seen a decline of, I think, of 423 students this year due to the significant loss in immigrant students. So there's a lot of very positive things happening in the district. We've also worked really hard to be good partners to charter schools. I'm a former charter operator myself, and I know what it takes to run a charter operation. I ran the largest charter operator in the state, the Baltimore Curriculum Project, that has some of the highest performing schools in the state. And so it is a very complicated role to run a charter operator, to actually provide good quality instruction, to increase enrollment, to provide a wide range of offerings, and to have good financial accountability. And so we make sure that our charters are doing that consistently across the school system. So those are my remarks.
Couple things I'll just say. Thank you for your comments. One, we'll say we understand that context matters, right, and the sources matter. So again, thank you for giving voice to that. But also, the progress has happened over the years, and as you mentioned, Baltimore Curriculum Project. I think about Frederick Elementary, which is in our district, is one of those conversion charter schools as well. And so again, even on the map that you showed earlier, looking at young people going from Stewart Hill that was closed and going to whether they go to Franklin Square or whether they go to Frederick Elementary, those walking paths, those safe routes, all that's important to the questions that were asked by some of our members of the council in terms of the things you think about in terms of safety and supporting families and young people. I'm going to end with some final comments. First, we'll start with Vice President Middleton. We'll then go to Council Member Blanchard and then Vice Chair and Chair. So please feel free.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and also thank you for your comments on just reiterating what we do. But I want to add to that. Just listening to some of the testimony, first I want to thank you, the people, for coming out testifying and sharing with us as a committee. And just for added understanding, the committees that we have are committees that work to put in bills that somehow has affected a part of the community or the entire city. And, understanding that this was kind of an informational hearing so all of us can really understand processes for the open and closing of schools throughout the city. And I have been, and we're district specific. We're elected for our specific districts. And I had a whole lot of schools that closed, and I went through probably at the beginning of learning the process myself of what, why a school was closed. I was devastated from Langston Hughes. It was not an all-boys school, but it was in my eyes, a successful school on that corner of, or close to the corner of Ricestown Road and Arbutus Drive. It was a happy school, really no problems. It was needed, but it was devastating to that community. And we did protests, we did a whole lot of stuff, and we weren't successful with that. But as a council person, I continue to work with that school to make sure that building turned into something that was still vital to that community. So I say to you, this might be a bump in the road, but don't give up. I'm listening, and some of the questions I have you been to MSDA? We literally, there's certain policies and procedures and laws that we really don't have that kind of power as a group. That's why we are so district specific, and we know what we need in our districts, and we try to work with the school system that way. I know the importance of having an all-boys school. We think it's a wonderful, needed thing, but I hate to say this, but it does fall on working with whoever that district representative is. They can help give you the resources. I literally don't know everything in that area. That's why we have council members for certain districts. I know everything that's going on in Park Heights or in Ashburton or with any other areas. That I know everything that's going on in that school system, and sometimes we are successful with things and sometimes we're not. But please don't leave here thinking that we're not listening or we don't understand. We're sitting here thinking, we don't know how we can help after the fact. And I'm concerned about that because it is something new that's kind of popping up. But, and I'll kind of stop there, but please don't leave here thinking that we do not care, and every district is part of the entire city, but we're limited with things like this on our specific district. And not putting anything to the representative that represents the district. It's just, I don't know. I'm just thinking this is, if you take it another step, you take it to the State Department of Education. I used to work for the State Department of Education, so I do know kind of that funnel system as far as an education process.
Well, again, thank you for what you shared. We're finished with public testimony at this point.
I just want to say that we're a citywide school, so our children come from every district.
Got
your
you.
district and your district.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I get it. So again, if you think about charter schools, you can serve a citywide population, but housed within a neighborhood, and that neighborhood is specific in a certain district. But again, I'm glad those things were lifted up. And again, appreciate you sharing your perspective and going through that process as well. So again, No, it's very helpful. Councilmember Blanchard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to echo Vice President Middleton's point to the folks who came out to testify. It's helpful to understand both the process of going through the school closure recommendation process from the school's perspective, also specifically in kind of just the common observation, thought, whatever they wanted to make. Councilwoman Ramos made the point about the history of single-sex education in city schools. I have, Bliss within my district that I'm always very impressed with, and I love what they do and support that school a lot. And on the private side, but with a probably socioeconomic demographic that I would imagine is similar to Baltimore Collegiate School for the boys, I also have St. Ignatius in my district, which, Councilman Gray is obviously a proud alumni of. I coach high school football, at Digital Harbor, which is, obviously all boys and predominantly African-American. This is like outside of my lane. I don't even know what there is to make of, and I know that city schools isn't really in the business of creating new schools right now, but I do think there really is something to be said about having the option for single-sex education within the public school system, and we are, losing that option for boys, and we're still gonna have it for girls, but I think that's something that is a lacuna. It's a gap in I think what we will be providing as a city. So for what that's worth. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well stated. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to return a little bit here at the end to the uniqueness and the different approach in the transition out or after the closure process between charter schools versus traditional schools, and I appreciate the answer there, but also I'm thinking that just by its nature, even with best efforts by the school system, that the level of support just is different, and my sense then is that maybe the outcomes for students might be different too. Which leaves me the question, you all presented very well on some of the work you've done with Hopkins in terms of what makes a good transition, right? I think it's a qualitative study from people who've been involved in that, what makes it, and the ways that you've applied that very effectively to the merging and closing and merging of traditional schools. Are you currently doing longitudinal studies of tracking students who have gone through, in terms of their academic performance, who have gone through the traditional school closure and merger process, and distinct from that, those who have gone through a charter school closure and that process? That might reveal both the successes of some approaches and some implementations, as well as might highlight some areas where we can and should be doing more for either one of those sets of students. Does that study currently exist in some form like that?
No, we don't have, at the current time, we don't have a longitudinal study because of the amount of transition we've had in terms of assessments. The state, we went from when we were in Park, then we had COVID. Now, so it interferes with you being able to have enough data to do that sort of study. We do an annual report as part of our policy when there's enough data for untraditional schools on the results of that closure. And like I said, we've engaged, is partly why we did a qualitative research study, because there's just limited data because of the interruptions that have happened in our trajectory of where we are in terms of this process. But it is something that we want to do in the future as we have are more stabilized and more comparable assessments to be able to do that kind of a study.
No, I appreciate that, and I certainly appreciate that there's so many factors that are going to influence student performance and outcomes. There are things like graduation rate and attendance rate that are independent of changing assessments, things like that, but are also influenced by things other than the transition process. But
yeah. We maybe we're closing different types of schools, different grade levels, so that plays into the complexity of what data you have available because of the changes and the number of schools. And so, you know, you need a certain amount of data to be able to do that.
I appreciate that. I hear an interest and a recognition of the importance of that, and so I look forward to further conversations with Baltimore City Schools about how you formulate that into a study moving forward. I think along those lines too, one of the challenges may be, and again, I think this is unavoidable. It doesn't mean it can't be tweaked or thought about, that it isn't being thought about and tweaked. But there are, if we have a traditional school in crisis, there are tools available in Baltimore City Schools to provide extra coaching and support, or to access financial resources, or to bring in, or to do a change in leadership, or to, I mean, there's things available, or if it's a physical building issue, right? There's things to do that are simply not the same tools available with charter schools. And so I think sometimes part of the struggle, and I heard it in the testimony today, is that there are conditions in a traditional school which might then trigger a really aggressive, proactive intervention to help support, sustain, and get the school into a better place. That with charter schools is more likely, because there's a different set of expectations and commitments, a different set of tools available, are more likely to result in the closure of that school. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but I'm saying it does create a dynamic where I can understand where folks are frustrated by the different outcomes there.
Just more of a statement, right? Yep. So again, thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee who are dedicated. Was there a follow-up point, please?
I mean, I would just say that I think there's a lot of differences between the two models, and the funding formula is very different to allow for support on the chart. There is a higher level of funding that goes to charter schools to allow them to provide the exact kind of support you're talking about, that it is the operator's responsibility to provide to the school. And that was what I took on very seriously when I was the executive director of a charter operator, is that I made very certain that we provided the supports to schools to make sure that they had what they needed, we wrote grants so that they had additional resources, that we brought in coaching and supports to them. I made it a solemn vow to make sure that anything I took out of the school with regards to a fee, that I more than replaced in terms of fundraising that I did for the school, and I was able to do that every single year that I was the executive director of the Baltimore Curriculum Project. So there is a serious role that the operator plays in terms of supporting a school, and you see a vast difference in the caliber of support that a charter operator plays, and it has a lot to do with the outcomes of the school. So I think that's just one thing to keep in mind. And then the planning for, and I've been in a charter school that was closed. One of my schools was closed when I was a charter operator. So I've been there for that process, and also helped make sure that we transitioned that school. We played a role in transitioning that school back to being a traditional school, and that money we had set aside for that school went to the school district so that they had money for that school to continue that operation. So those are all solemn responsibilities of a charter operator, and there is a reason that I have fought passionately to make sure that charter schools are not funded at the expense of traditional schools, which has been the problem for all these years. Even I had that role and position even when I was a charter school operator, because the whole point of the model is to make sure that you are an asset to the school system, that you are not taking resources from other schools.
I'll just say, as we close out, thank you for walking us through those steps and that process. As was mentioned by a few of our colleagues, this is an informational hearing. And so I say, even as an educator and even as someone who is chairing the education committee, I got an education today, right? And I think it's important for us to ask those questions, to hear from residents, hear from administrators, hear from schools, and hear from parents, but also hear from those who are operating, those who are engaged in the school system, that this work is not easy. It's very complex, but it's very important. At the end of the day, and I say this as an educator, I say as a father, the most important thing is our young people, and making sure our young people are on a pathway to success. And I know that everyone here is in this room today is committed to that, because you wouldn't be here if you weren't committed to that. So again, thank you all for being here. We know this is an ongoing issue, but again, thank you for your time today. At this point, our committee will stand adjourned. Take care.